Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 46, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. I am your host, VyseTheBold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
Alright. Well, let's see here. Pyro is gone for the week, because he's probably talking to his mom again.
No, it's because he's fired, because that joke's still funny.
Ha Pyro, get it? He's fired.
The exact correct amount of laughter.
Technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Well, actually, OldManStompy is on here for a number of reasons, but we will indulge him in his proclivities.
All right. So, those of you who follow my previous appearances in this podcast know that I generally talk about wrestling and The Binding of Isaac. So there will not be any wrestling on this episode, because we're saving it for Recon, because it was a really big week this week. There was a very unusual title change. So if you want to hear the story behind it and how absurd it actually was, I encourage our listeners to catch our sister podcast in 2 days. Also, regarding The Binding of Isaac, I didn't play it in the last 2 weeks, despite finally being so excited that I finished all the time-gated content that I could just play at my own leisure. I didn't play any Binding of Isaac, but I did purchase Enter the Gungeon.
That game's awesome.
I've heard it's the game. It's the other roguelite that's been recommended to me the most as a wonderful successor.
Rogue Legacy is really good too.
But personally, I find that it doesn't really stand up to repeated playthroughs. I know it's designed to be played through multiple times, but I didn't really find it that enjoyable past beating the storyline the first time around.
Actually, Lotus and I played Enter the Gungeon quite a bit.
Nice.
One time when he came over. So
wait, I played.
What did you think of that?
Wait, I played Enter the Gungeon? Are you sure?
I played it and you watched. I guess.
Did I? I do not remember
this. It has different mutations that give you different abilities.
No. That was Nuclear Throne.
Oh yes, that's right. Nuclear Throne. I apologize.
That was pretty fun.
Similar.
I've also heard good things about Nuclear Throne.
Yeah, it's fun.
But I specifically bought Enter the Gungeon, so probably the next time I'm on the cast, I'll have some opinions about that, I suspect. Otherwise, I recently started playing Spirit Camera, which I don't know if Lotus is familiar with. It's the 3DS AR tech demo.
It's not Fatal Frame for the 3DS.
No, it's
actually the only game. It's actually the only game that you own for the 3DS, isn't it?
Ooh. No, I have Project Cross Zone 1 and 2, and I might have one or something. I got Resident Evil Mercenaries 3D, but let's get back to OldManStompy.
But have you played Spirit Camera?
No, because I don't actually have a 3DS.
I don't have any follow-up statements to that.
Yeah, I got the games just in case they disappeared later. Because by the time I get a 3DS, God knows what'll still be around, you know.
Yeah, well, thankfully I picked up Spirit Camera on clearance for $10 from Target, because while it's really interesting, actually, the storyline is an hour and a half long, and I would have felt really bad if I'd spent $30 or $40 on it retail when it came out.
Yeah.
But the concept is really cool. It opens up by you taking a picture of your face, and the gimmick is that it literally is called Fatal Frame. It's definitely a canonical Fatal Frame game.
Okay.
That's the name of the storyline, Fatal Frame, the Cursed Memoir, or something like that. If you actually play the story mode, and it has the zero shot and everything. It
has a camera obscura and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I do want to throw one thing at you, because one of the gimmicks of the game is that you have, in addition to the instruction manual, you have a manual that has these weird pages that don't make sense, and at certain points in the game you're supposed to take or at least look at them, if not take pictures of them with your 3DS, and you'll see, I guess, what they're supposed to look like. You sort of decode the pictures with your 3DS. It's like a filter to make the pictures make sense.
It's much cooler than that. As an example, if you take a picture of the first page, it's the first thing you're supposed to do at the start of the game. Mm-hmm. The first page is just a blank sheet of paper, and if you watch it on your 3DS screen, words will appear, because one of the hosts is speaking to you, and it doesn't matter what angle you view it at. the game, like I said, the concept is really interesting. There are a couple of fights that require you to do really unusual things with the manual. Like, there's a fight against, like, a dismembered hand that you have to fight while you're, like, keeping a bloody handprint in the camera at all times, and that can be really, like, finicky and hard to pick up. Especially maybe with the new 3DS, because that has 2 cameras.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure how that plays into the AR. I had a lot of difficulty with that fight. It really hurt my arms because I had to play with the camera in one hand and the...
Actually, every 3DS has 2 cameras, because that's part of the gimmick of taking a 3D picture.
Okay, I thought there was something improved about the 3D on the new 3DS that required a second camera.
There's, like, better tracking, but that's it.
Alright, well, I stand corrected. Well, anyway, the 2 cameras, it's still pretty aggravating to get the book that you're trying to keep in the frame at the same time you're trying to track the ghost with the camera obscura.
You used to get to whip both your arms around all the time.
Yeah, so, like, eventually I started to get really sore after I died a couple times. There's not that many fights in the game, so the ones that are awkward really stand out.
But by the way, the reason I brought up that AR book is that, I mean, OldManStompy, I know you lived in Europe for a while. Did you ever pick up the remake of Fatal Frame 2 for the Wii, like Project Zero 2?
No, I never picked it up. Video games are really expensive in Europe, at least the part of Europe that I lived in, so I didn't buy something unless I really, really wanted it.
Well, because the reason I mention that is that either on the box or it might have been on the back of its manual or something, there's an additional AR page, and I don't know what's on it. And I just thought it was kind of cool.
You'll have to live in mystery a little bit longer.
Oh, no!
Anyway... Let's see. So anyway, that's all I have to say on that. It'll probably only take me maybe more 1 or 2 playthroughs to actually finish the storyline mode, because it's not a long game. So I don't have a lot to say on it right now, besides introducing it to our audience. Other than that, I picked up Final Fantasy XIV again. I know Pyro's talked about this a little bit. We're sort of all trying to get into it. Myself, my wife, Mr. Ryu, I know, is playing it again. Pyro's playing it again, and his girlfriend's going to pick it up pretty soon. And we're all expecting to play on the same server.
That's awesome.
Sometime by the end of June, right around the time that the new expansion comes out, Stormblood, which is great because supposedly it changes the combat system significantly, as well as how to spec your character, at least in terms of what your skill distribution is, like what skills you pick up for your base class, and how you supplement them with skills from your secondary classes. That's supposed to change substantially and be dramatically simplified in Stormblood. So I'm sure that I will spend the next month learning how to play the game, and then have to forget all of it in a month when it's time for all of us to play together and actually hard content. But at least...
What class are you planning on playing as?
So I started as a Thaumaturge, which is the base class that becomes the Black Mage. The raids in 14 work where every party unit is 2 DPS characters, a tank, and a white mage of some kind, a healer. So last I heard, when Pyro and Mr. Ryu play, they're a tank and a healer respectively. So we had to bring in 2 DPS characters.
Gotcha.
Of course, that was when they got back into the game like a year ago when Heaven's Word came out. So I think... so my wife is picking up White Mage, and Mr. Ryu might play his tank character, and then I believe Pyro's girlfriend is physical DPS, so I'll be the ranged DPS.
It seems like MMOs are becoming like a little bit more mainstream again. Like it's more than just a little. For a while there, it was pretty much just WoW, but it seems like even FF11 is getting like another following, like build up back again, and it seems like Elder Scrolls Online has quite a bit of a following now as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this because I know Final Fantasy XI had a mobile game released as a spin-off in Japan, and so people who used to play a lot of Final Fantasy XI have now moved to that game. In fact, there was like the biggest whale in Wrecker Keeper, my mobile game of choice. He quit Wrecker Keeper after probably spending thousands of dollars on it to go play this new Final Fantasy XI Grandmasters game. It's actually pretty annoying because it tends to have these collaborative events with Wrecker Keeper that release all the Final Fantasy XI characters, and we never get them because the app isn't available in America. Wow. So I find that kind of frustrating. But yeah, like it has kind of had this like sort of last gasp resurgence. I think the last content patch for Final Fantasy XI came out sometime early this year or last year, and now the game is complete. So everybody who wants to play through the whole game. I know Mr. Ryu is planning on getting back into it because I think the Square Enix account for 11 is free for a little while. So they're trying to get people back into the game to see how much they can sustain in 11, like at their peak, because there's no more content. So
yeah, because 14's supposed to be where it's at. All right.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's where all the effort is going, and it's explicitly not supposed to be like a second 11. So people who really like the 11 playstyle, those are the only people who are still playing 11 right now.
Yeah. Makes sense.
See. Otherwise, the only other thing I did, since that took up an awful lot of my time, was I watched up to episode 30 of the original Kamen Rider series.
Nice.
And I have basically one or two remarks about that besides what I've mentioned before. I think I was up to about episode 6 when I was on the podcast 2 weeks ago. And
is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
Worth the time?
Like, I can't say that I invest a lot of mental energy into it. I would say that for me, it's a break between consuming other media and playing video games while I still have time at my television, because it doesn't strain my eyes as much to watch a television series as it does to play, you know, Enter the Gungeon or Binding of Isaac or an MMO, even an MMO. So it's a nice, like, break. I'm watching it subtitled, so it's not like an American television show where I can keep it on in the background and sort of pay half attention to it. So maybe that by itself takes a little bit more effort than it's worth, but it's still interesting to really watch, because at this early stage the show is still developing quite a bit, and like watching them try out new different types of special effects and seeing how they try the best they can to show off what they're trying to get the audience to interpret with their limited, you know, costume budget, their limited special effects budget, their limited amount of film. Like, that's really interesting to me, to watch the show evolve and to get better at being a tokusatsu show. At the end of... It seems like the show follows the seasonal Japanese television schedule, so they treated the 14th episode like a new season.
Oh, okay.
So part of that was because...
Did they change, like, a theme song or anything like that?
They changed the theme song a little bit. So the original Kamen Rider actor, Hiroshi Fujioka, also sang the original theme song.
Nice.
I know this... I know his name because, and I mentioned this on Facebook, but I think this is the first time we brought it up on the podcast. He's also the actor who played Segata Sanshiro.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yes, he's the actor who played the Japanese mascot for the Sega Saturn. Also
That's
featured completely out of nowhere in Project Cross Zone 2.
That's delightful.
And so part of what
amazing.
made that so amusing to me was I had a bit of a thought that, like, the character of Segata Sanshiro would never have made it into a US game like 5, even 10, even maybe 5 years ago, because it would have been completely ininterpretable to an American audience. But now you can just go on YouTube and search for Segata Sanshiro, and you'll get just a block of 20 minutes of all the commercials, including a reference to the game that he got at the end of the Sega Saturn's lifespan.
Yep.
And you can just fill up, you can just completely, re-educate yourself as to who this character is.
Sure.
And that makes me happy, because it means that hopefully Japanese publishers will be less shy about releasing these games with these obscure characters, because American audiences can just go figure it out for themselves. And I do like that publishers don't always treat the audience so with kid gloves, like we're too stupid to go figure out if something is, not to do this research on our own.
Yeah, and not to mention that, sometimes they should bring characters into their media precisely because they're obscure, at least by our standards. Like, Fire Emblem is a thing in America because we were curious about Marth and Roy back on Super Smash Bros. Melee for the GameCube.
Right, and now it's really popular. I mean, nobody's making new Sega Saturn games in America, so it's a bit of a moot point for Sanshiro. But anyway, so in the Kamen Rider case, he got into a motorcycle accident filming one of the later episodes in the first 13-episode season, and they had to replace him with a new actor. It's kind of interesting to watch the last couple of episodes of that first 13-episode block, because they were very clearly using an actor and a voiceover and, like, stock footage of him, because he just wasn't available and severely injured, couldn't film anything for the last couple of episodes. So they brought someone new in, and they called that the second season, even though it's still called Kamen Rider and still considered part of the first series. And then at the end of the second block of 13 episodes, they introduce a villain for the first time. This guy, General Zoll. The villains in the first Kamen Rider series are very obviously villains. So the first guy's called General Zoll. The follow-up is called Dr. Shinigami.
they're twirling
come
their
on.
mustaches.
The third one is called Ambassador Hell. And I think
by
the
the
fourth
way,
one is I think the fourth one is General Black.
By the way, Vice, do you know what Shinigami is?
Yes.
Well, I know what Shikigami is, so that's pretty similar, right?
Yeah, it's a game with bad voice acting, yes. No, Shinigami is like, you'll hear it all the time in Death Note. It basically means, I think, Death God, if I'm right.
Well, that's where I
kind of.
heard it originally, I guess, because I remember having heard it at some point.
Or actually, maybe it was Bleach, but whatever. Like, yeah, you'll hear Shinigami like all the time in those.
Yeah, Bleach is most people's entry points. I mean, in the American dub, they called it Soul Reaper. But it's basically to draw the parallel between the American concept of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, just one final note is that in the fight scenes, in almost every episode of the first series, Kamen Rider, the first one, Kamen Rider Ichigo, he performs in his choreography a fireman's carry judo throw. That's usually how he gets the enemy in position for the rider kick for his finishing move. It's in almost every episode. It's really obvious. And it was pointed out to me as I was watching the series. There was an interview with Shinsuke Nakamura, who's the top Japanese star who's currently wrestling for the WWE, and he mentioned that in Japan, part of the reason why Japanese wrestling comes across as more authentic and they use more chain grappling than American wrestling uses is because a lot of Japanese school children grow up taking judo as a mandatory part of their PE.
Oh, wow.
Meaning that that part
Everybody
of Kamen Rider
kind of knows it.
Yeah, was really specifically targeted towards kids on top of that, which is why they always use this really basic judo throw. And what's funny to me is that in the second season, so the second writer they bring in, this guy, in the show he's named Hayato Ichimonji. I don't remember the actor's name off the top of my head. I don't have it in my notes. I failed to study for the podcast.
Oh no!
But he's more of a brawler, and so it's usually the monster that uses the same judo throw on him, but he always reverses it and he lands on his feet. And that's funny to me because John Cena in the WWF, the fireman's carry throw body slam is his finishing move. It's the attitude adjustment. And the major reversal to that people will always try in a major match against John Cena will be to reverse it by landing on their feet and then segueing into one of their finishers. And to watch people do that flawlessly every single time in Kamen Rider, knowing that it was a low-budget tokusatsu show, they probably didn't have that many takes to get it right, and that John Cena, even against really skilled wrestlers like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, they never pull it off. They always land on their butts. So
wow, that's pretty great.
Yeah. So I guess I know now where it came from in professional wrestling too, because I'm assuming Cena took it from some inspiration. He's really well learned in the art of professional wrestling. So I'm assuming he learned it from someone who learned it originally from a judoka.
That's awesome.
So that's been my couple of weeks since the last time I was in the cast. So other than the major wrestling stuff we'll be talking about during Recon, I'll be happy to hear about what Lotus has been up to.
Sure. First of all, I played a little more Yakuza 5, and I finally got to meet the new character. So I finished up the Haruka and Akiyama segments, and by the way, despite what I said last time I mentioned Haruka, we're gonna break the streak of her being captured because I'm playing as her, well, when I played as Akiyama, she got captured. So it's there it is. What was really interesting, though, was that I put the video up on my YouTube channel before, but Akiyama's first boss is this just brick of a man who just walks in and points a gun at Akiyama, and Akiyama's like, well, who are you supposed to be? And the guy's like, well, you're going to be dead in a few seconds, so I don't really need to tell you. And so as he's aiming his gun, Haruka's standing on, the second floor of a fire escape, and she just throws a fire extinguisher at the guy's head, and it hits him on the side of the head completely without warning. And he just kind of looks up at her like, huh? And while he's looking up, Akiyama's like, you should be looking at me. And you kick him in the side of the head, which he is also not expecting. Mm-hmm. And he flinches very slightly, but otherwise just stares at you without changing expression. And you're like, okay. So, yeah.
Even Kazuma uses that. Kazuma Kiryu uses that, I think, in Yakuza 2. There's a fight sequence that starts with someone trying to break a bottle over his head, and they succeed. And he just turns around and looks at him like, Like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah, it's like that, but the thing is, Akiyama's like Mr. Kick and the guy you're playing as, and you hit him when he didn't expect it at all, and he just, like, his head moved to the side. Like, I told this device off the air, but remember that part in, I mean, OldManStompy, you watched all of Dragon Ball Z, right?
Yep.
Remember?
Most of it, yeah.
Well, you saw the Cell Saga?
Yeah.
Remember when Perfect Cell asked Vegeta to hit him as hard as he could, and Vegeta just kicks him in the side of the head, and his head moves a little bit, and he just smiles at him? It was it was basically that, and it was like, oh no. So this guy is just a tank, and when you beat him in the fight, he just kind of walks away. He's like, I'll remember you. And you're just like, oh shit. What's interesting though is the deal with this guy and Haruka is that this guy is not the boss. Like, he has a boss who's a much smaller man, but he's apparently stupidly strong. So the guy wants Haruka to deliver this letter that he's been trying to, like, steal, and clearly stealing isn't working. So he, like, after a little while, he calls up. Now, how does it work? No, Haruka gets captured, and the boss actually just brings her back himself. Like, you don't have to rescue her. He just walks back right into where everybody, including you, are standing. He just puts her down, and he's like, don't worry, she's fine. Like, I didn't actually want her captured. Not that there's any way you're going to believe me, but whatever. Could you please ask her to deliver me the letter? So he's just straight up asking. Like, he's not trying anything shady. So he walks away. And then when Haruka wakes up, she checks her phone, which says, dial this number as soon as you read it. So she calls it, and it's that guy who's, like, running for chairman of the Omi Alliance, which were the bad guys in Yakuza 2. And he's like, yeah, bring me the letter and meet me at such and such train station. Come alone. And also, I swear to God, I will come alone. So Haruka shows up to the train station, the guy's not there, and the big guy and, like, 8 guys are. So you're like, oh great, this guy's a lying asshole. So the guy tries, like, intimidating Haruka into giving him the letter, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And the guy's like, you realize that you're a little kid, and I'm a monster, and I have a bunch of dudes anyway. We can very easily just grab you and take you to us. You want to go that way?
Talk.
yeah, exactly. He's like, it is crazy how easy it is for me to get this letter from you if I want to do it aggressively. Are you sure about this? And Haruka's like, yes. And he's like, wow, okay. So they just, like, grab her and take her away. Or start to, but then Akiyama comes and saves the day. Now, as it turns out, the Omi chairman is not a dick. The gigantic subordinate actually acted on his own and made him look bad. So it's like, so now asking is just not going to work. Now he's going to have to take it because his subordinate unwittingly just completely screwed that plan up. But the reason I mention all this is that this man who took a sucker kick to the head from Akiyama without seemingly to be damaged at all, he goes back to HQ, and the boss is pretty pissed at him for, like, screwing everything up. He's like, you do realize that Haruka has spent the entire video game series since the PS2 being captured by and intimidated by Yakuza, and by this point it's old hat. And apparently she dug her heels in when you tried acting aggressively. Basically what I'm saying is that you were unable to scare a little girl. Congratulations, now we look like idiots because of you. And he actually puts the guy in a headlock that he can't seem to break out of, and, like, takes a lit cigarette and just, like, shoves it into his eye. And it's like, Jesus. So that guy's pissed, and I'll have to fight him, I'm sure, later, so that'll be scary. Otherwise, the last thing I wanted to mention with Haruka is, you know that Japanese stand-up comedy style where there's 2 guys and
yes.
One of them tells some kind of story and the other, it usually gets stupid and the second guy, like, smacks him upside the head or something. There's actually a mini game where you're part of a comedy duo as Haruka, and it is hard. Like, it's mainly hard because it was localized to English, because I can read everything the guy's gonna say, but in addition to choosing a proper response to him, you have to do it as soon as he's done talking, but of course he's speaking in Japanese, so I just kind of have to wait for there to clearly be an end to the talking, and it's kind of difficult to get down at first. But it's really, really weird to see Haruka just being like, shut up, that's dumb, and, like, smack a guy upside the head, because that is so wildly out of character for her. It's pretty entertaining. The last thing I want to mention about Yakuza 5 is that the new character looks interesting. I think he's my least favorite to play in Brawl style, but he's basically a disgraced baseball player. So this guy hits hard, and he's really into throws and grappling moves. And he's taken some of the moves from the cop from Yakuza 4, where he just does a bunch of arm breaks. But his deal is that he hit like a game-winning pitch like 20-something years ago, but he was accused of cheating and like trading signs with the other players and everything, so he was kicked out. So he was set up somehow, and he doesn't know how. You know, it's kind of like Shaolin Soccer, like something interfered and without the player's knowledge, and he's going to try to get on that and see how he can, like, I guess, discover the secret of his past and possibly redeem himself. Not that he needs redeeming, but the world needs to know. So we'll see where that goes. It's interesting. I guess to be a little more on the brief side, I also have been playing a bunch of the American McGee's Grimm episodes. They came out when I was in college. They were released on GameTap. Now you could just get them on GOG and probably Steam, but they were episodes that came out weekly, 23 episodes for 23 weeks. The basic idea is there's all sorts of Grimm's fairy tales. Not all Grimm. There's like the Christmas Carol in there, and that's Charles Dickens, but like mostly fairy tales. And the idea is you're supposed to be dissatisfied with how they worked out and make them darker and more disturbing. But I think the execution is flawed. Like, the gameplay is actually pretty fun. It's almost like Katamari. You're not rolling things up and getting bigger, but you're running around and corrupting things very close to you, and as you get more done, instead of growing bigger and being able to roll up bigger things, you get, like, grimier, and your area of decay spreads, and you can affect bigger things like buildings as you go. It's actually really fun to play, but the basic idea of the game, I think, is a little funky. Yeah, Vice, what's up?
So, one thing that I wanted to ask you is, have you played any of his other games? Like, have you played Scrapland? I heard Scrapland was actually pretty decent.
No, I only recently picked it up. I got the Xbox version because I haven't seen the PC version around in a long time. I missed out on my opportunity for that one. But
the Xbox version is comparable to the PC version at the time, so you'll have a fun time with the Xbox version. Yeah,
the only the only McGee games I've played were both Alice's and most of Grimm. I have not played Akanero, but that's a free-to-play Steam game where it's like Twisted Little Red Riding Hood with a heavy Japanese theme. I don't know much about it outside of that, though.
Gotcha.
But with Grimm, the gameplay is actually pretty fun, though very short. But I feel that the general idea kind of, like, the game interferes with itself. It kind of renders itself redundant because you can't really change most plot elements of a story to make it more twisted, because the story kind of comes in beats. Like, for the Christmas Carol, you have, it's like 6 little parts. Like, part 1 is where you meet Bob Cratchit. Part 2 is, like, Ghost of Christmas Past. 3 is present, 4 is future, 5 is Scrooge redeeming himself, and 6 is something else, maybe like post-redemption or something. So you're going to have those beats when it tells the story, and after you corrupt each episode, it gives you a dark version of the story, but it still has to follow the same beats, because it kind of can't get out of that, so it's basically the same story, only, like, everyone's more of a jerk, you know, so, like, the dialogue might change, where it's like, oh, I don't like you, or whatever, but, like, you can't, like, radically alter the course of the story anyway, so it's more like a more mean-spirited version of the same story, so it's kind of pointless. Like, I appreciate that the game shows you the stories, especially if you haven't read them before, and it's cool to run around in their worlds, but, like, if your real goal is to try to make the stories darker, like, it doesn't really pay off the way I think it came off on paper. Not to mention, some of the stories are pretty damn dark anyway. Like Godfather Death. It's like, and then the kid dies because he pissed off Death. It's like, you're gonna make that darker? Like, maybe you can make his death more violent or something, but, like, it's like, you can't escape that. Yeah, you really can't escape that. So, I mean, like, the games are interesting to play if you have them, but I wouldn't go out of my way to get them if I hadn't already, unless you're just, like, an American McGee nerd. So, like, I'd actually consider Let's Playing them, because it's like, oh, another American McGee story, and I love fairy tales, but like, it just comes off as more mean-spirited than anything else, even though the gameplay is kind of entertaining to look at, I guess. Like, for a game that's, like, I value story more than gameplay, which is unlike a lot of people, but the whole point of these games is changing the story, and you don't really change the story. So, I mean, just read the stories if you want to burn through them, unless you really want visuals, because they are kind of cool visuals, I guess. And super last thing is I finally started Let's Playing Skies of Arcadia. I haven't uploaded anything yet because I've only just started recording, and
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all,
our life has been a lie all this time.
Yeah.
Like,
I based my my name off of something completely, totally
coincidental.
A really exciting visit to Ace Hardware.
But Skies of Arcadia is a long-ass game, so I have a lot of recording to do. But I got through the first dungeon, so okay.
Are you doing a Dreamcast or GameCube version?
GameCube.
Gotcha.
And it's a lot of nostalgia.
The correct choice.
What?
That's the correct choice.
Yeah, there's lower encounter rate, and also it comes with all the extra content that the DC version doesn't have. Like the only
slight.
I was gonna say the only
drawback.
thing it's missing is the VMU games for those 3 idols you get. But I'll live.
That and they didn't. I have a feeling that the Red Book audio with the music was timed in the revolutions of the GDR ROM for the Dreamcast. So therefore, on the GameCube, the sound is slightly warped for the music during the overworld stuff, so it doesn't sound quite right.
I wouldn't know.
So I think it's due to the fact that the GameCube disc is spinning faster.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's playing at a faster rate than it should, and they didn't fix it.
That I wouldn't know, but yeah. I'll still take it. Like it comes with all the DLC and stuff. But I can't.
Oh, it's better.
But I can't access the Skies of Arcadia homepage via the Dreamcast, even though it no longer exists. But yeah, so it's super entertaining to play. Like Rule of Rose is finally finished on YouTube. Honestly, kind of. Although it was very entertaining to see the viewers' comments on where they thought the game was going to go and like what it all means at the end, because that game's complicated. Like it really is. Like there's still debate on like specificity. Like I mean the meaning comes through, but it's like, but what actually happened to these adults? What was the deal with Mr. Wilson? And like there's definitely a type of thing that could have happened, but as for specifics, like did this adult leave or was he killed? Either way, he's gone. But if you're morbidly curious, then it's kind of up in the air. It doesn't matter too much, but it'd be nice to know. So stuff like that. But yeah, so it was cool to see how that played out, and it's really just a blast of like nostalgia to play Skies of Arcadia again. It's really cool to just board Alfonso's ship and like hear him dispose of them. Like, yes, can't wait to deal with you. So yeah, that was my week. How about yours, Vice?
As listeners have been aware of in the last couple weeks, the month of May has been very tough for me. For work and things like that, because first of all, I had 2 weddings, one of which we talked about extensively last week. So a lot of my weekends have been taken up by good things, but there's still obligations, things that I haven't been getting much rest in. Let's just put it that way. And as a result, and I've also had my state exam, so I've been studying on Sundays. And other days leading up to those for my work in order to get licensed in other states. The good news is that I passed 2 out of the 3 tests, and only one other person passed one of the tests in my entire group. So out of 36 tests, 3 tests were passed, and 2 of them were mine. So I was happy about the accomplishment of passing my tests and getting good ratings comparatively, but as a result, I haven't been able to do a lot of free time kind of things, watch a lot of movies or anything like that. So it was unfortunate, but I had played a little bit, a couple games while studying in order to break up the monotony. And one of them, a couple people will be happy to hear. I got into Quake II, of all things. So there is a really nice fan port of it, where they update it to have higher resolutions and higher textures and modern controls and things like that. And it's called Quake II XP, and it's excellent. It's really, really good. So one big problem with the GOG release and also the Steam release is that they, for some reason, released it without the music.
Ooh.
So it might have been a rights issue, or they just didn't. They were too lazy and didn't fix it. When in releasing it for modern systems. So this also remedies that problem. The music in Quake 2 is a big part of Quake 2. It has like a really awesome, rocking soundtrack.
Isn't that a heavy like Nine Inch Nails inspired?
Yeah,
music?
to the point where the nail gun ammo boxes have NIN on them.
Yeah,
like 9 Inch Nails.
Oh, by the way, you said that Quake 2 XP has higher resolution and
yes.
stuff like that. You know what's kind of funny is my only experience with Quake 2 is on the Nintendo 64.
Actually, that version is really cool. I actually just saw a comparison video of all the versions of Quake 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is kind of unique. It actually has its own levels and stuff.
Oh, nice.
And it has its own engine. So that's actually a pretty cool port of the game. It's not a bad one in the slightest. In fact, you could play it in addition to the PC version.
Nice.
Because it has its own layouts and things. And it was kind of made as more like a complement game. Kind of
like Doom 64.
Yeah, it's not a port. It's its own game that kind of embodies the essence of the original version. But
Mm-hmm.
since it was on an inferior piece of hardware, they kind of made up their own thing that kind of gets the idea right. So that is a good game to play and not a bad version at all. It's just that the PC version is very much a classic.
Sure.
So I was happy to play that, and great version of it. A lot of fun. That's just a testament to how good the game is, because it's still a lot of fun these days. It's still a lot of fun to find the secrets. So those id games really were top notch. They were so much fun to play. So I also played Blaster Master Zero for a little bit, and it's a fine remake of Blaster Master. There's probably no good reason why you would want to go back to the original version.
It gives you
Blaster
freaking
Master.
Continue points, like at save point. Yes, please.
It's basically what the original should have been given forethought. So it's a very good... It's kind of like Metroid Zero Mission. Once Zero Mission came out, there's really no good reason to go back to Metroid other than to torture yourself, because like it gets rid of all the parts that make it difficult to play.
Yeah, I mean, I recall like the original Metroid isn't unlockable on Zero Mission after you complete it, and I recall actually clearing the original Metroid for the very first time on Zero Mission, and the first time you die, wherever you restart, you have only 30 health, no matter how many. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, dying sucks because you have to grind for health. Yeah,
you have to grind for health every time you die. Mm-hmm. So that's actually the major inconvenience of that entire game. I would say that everything else is bearable, even, but that is the worst part of that game. Even above the map issue.
Right. I remember, like, I used to be a gamer. I was born in 1982. I cut my teeth as a gamer on a lot of these NES games, and I almost don't remember going back, since a lot of these retro games I played, like this re-release of Metroid. This came out when I was in grad school, I think. I don't remember games being this hard when I was a kid. Like, I used to think there was a point when I was in like high school, college, when I felt like I was getting better at games. Like, that was when I beat the original Final Fantasy for the first time. And then when I went back and tried to play Dino City after the JonTron video, which I remember renting from Blockbuster.
That game's hard as hell.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah. I got really close to the end when I was in like middle school, whenever that game came out, and I died over and over and over again trying to play it as an adult, as like a 30-year-old adult, and I was like, what is wrong with me?
Well, yeah, like I mean, when I was streaming,
we also had more patience back then too. You know, you got to remember.
But even so, when I was streaming, I talked about this like last week, but when I was streaming Sonic the Hedgehog 1, I used up definitely 1, possibly even 2 continues. At least 1 full continue on Scrap Brain Zone Act 3, and it's just like I don't remember taking that long on a single act of a single level when I was a kid.
I did watch your Ghouls and Ghosts stream, and
I took like 45 minutes just on level 5.
Yeah, I could tell by the end of level 5, like it's subtle. I know it better because I know you personally. I could tell that it was really wearing on you by the end of that level.
Actually, honestly, that stream was kind of a test for myself because I wanted to see if I could keep my cool while playing a game like that, like when I'm while I'm on the air. Yeah, like can I do this without flipping out and embarrassing myself? The answer is yes, by the way. Let's see if I can do it again later.
Well, flipping out, yes.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm a big fan of remakes like this where they keep the spirit of the original, like they keep the challenge, but they get rid of poor design decisions. I'm okay with that kind of thing. You know, I don't think challenge needs to come from poor game design. It just doesn't. And in fact, it's way better that way. I mean, like Dark Souls games are challenging but have great game design. So it should be like that. You know, it should be challenging. The stakes should be high, but also allow you to continue easily.
So, like, a counterpoint to that would be, like, the DS remake of Final Fantasy III. I think it's also now on iOS, the 3D remake
Steam.
of it. It's basically the exact same game. In fact, the sort of slavish attention to getting the maps translated into 3D with the exact same like tile layout as the original NES game is pretty thorough, but that also means there are things like there's no save point in the final dungeon despite it taking like hours to play through.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
That sucks.
They could have fixed that. That's a great opportunity to fix something like that.
Yeah, there's no reason not to have you can get to like the midway point and then you can go back and save, so you don't have to fight all the bosses again in sequence. But the whole last segment has to be done in one run-through. That includes about 10 boss fights, maybe 9.
Final Fantasy 1's like that, too. Yeah. The final dungeon, you have to fight everybody, I think.
Oh, and
in the final dungeon, you have to fight the same boss 4 times, plus 4 new bosses, plus the final boss, which is a 2-stage final boss fight in Final Fantasy tradition. And it's a long fight.
And by the way, OldManStompy, you mentioned the Dark Souls games where like you can pick up and go. This is honestly, it's kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, especially because this stuff is cheap. But one thing that irks me about Bloodborne is that whatever the healing items are called, blood vials, I guess, any of those you use, if you die, are gone, and you'll either have to grind for them or buy some more. Like, that's one thing I liked about the actual Souls games, is the Estus flasks, is that you just, like, you have them.
Refill them at the
they cost nothing. Like, if you die, they're back. If you hit a bonfire, they're back. But with Bloodborne, they're consumable, and that's just a little bit, like, you could do worse, but that's still a little bit frustrating.
Though. Yeah. They're cheap, though. Well, anyway, I do like this kind of thing. I haven't played a ton of it, but I will continue, and I really enjoy it so far. And the pixel art in it is gorgeous, and a really great facelift to the original game. They added some really nice parallax scrolling and things like that as well. So really great, great remake. So anyway, I picked up Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia as well.
Nice.
So there is a lot of divisive opinions about this. Some people love it, and some people kind of are meh about it. And so what a lot of people don't realize is that this is a remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden for the NES. Speaking of this kind of thing, so it doesn't play like a modern Fire Emblem game. It just doesn't. But it also improves upon. It's probably the weirdest Fire Emblem game. It's probably like the Zelda 2 of Fire Emblem in a lot of ways, and it was meant to be. You know, it's a Fire Emblem Gaiden. You know, it's a side story. So there are dungeons in the game, just to give you an idea. So it's different than most Fire Emblem games in that way. But apparently it makes the game a lot easier to play than the original. I'm mostly picking it up because I'm a casual Fire Emblem fan, and I have all the rest of them. And one of these days, I'm gonna play through a lot of what's going on in those. But I guess my thought is that this is a very late 3DS release, a first-party one, and for a series that is beloved by a lot of people. And it's a weird game, so therefore a lot of people aren't gonna buy it now. But later on, it's probably going to be one of those games where people are really seeking it out. Plus, there aren't a whole lot of copies to go around of it, so I think it's definitely going to be a rarity. And especially since the Switch is out now, and Nintendo's efforts are certainly going towards the Switch. I don't know of any other first-party 3DS games to still be released after this. I can't think of any. Can you? Can you guys?
Offhand, not really.
Top of my head. I said, I already established I didn't study very well for this podcast during my segment. So
ARMS is probably the next. I think it is the next first-party title, Nintendo first-party title, and I think it's going to continue that way. Splatoon 2 is supposed to come out pretty soon, and move on from there. So, definitely, I suggest to other people, if you ever think that you may be interested in this game, pick it up, or at least pick it up to kind of have one of the very last first-party releases for the system, if not one of the very last, games with a decent amount of polish. So I picked that up, and I also want to do a vinyl update because I've been talking about this recently. So I didn't realize this, but Snatcher had been released on vinyl very recently, and the soundtrack. And I'm a huge, Lotus and I are huge Snatcher fans, and we did a
you converted me.
Yeah, and well, we first played it together back in college.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know anything about the Sega CD, and you're like Snatcher. I'm like, I don't even know what Snatcher is. And then you showed me, and I think. At the time, I think we played through it We played
through the whole thing.
Like, in one sitting. And, like...
Yeah. We even played it with the Justifier and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't voice acting or anything, so... But, like, that's a long game, and we just, like, destroyed it overnight.
Yeah, and we've done it a couple times, even. We did it at my place, like, about a year later, I think, too. It's just one of those things...
Yeah, well, that was the last
That was for the LP. Yeah. But, I mean, it was worth doing that again anyway, just because it's one of those games you should probably play once a year, like a good movie, you know?
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that you should watch pretty frequently. This is a game that has very little fanfare. There isn't really any merchandise to go along with it. You know, it's a rare Sega CD game. It was rare when it came out. It was not widely played. And it's never been re-released elsewhere in the United States. It's been re-released elsewhere in Japan, but
it actually has a lot of recently releases in Japan for like every system at the time.
But it has very little love in the U.S. And to have something that has a lot of fanfare, such as like a vinyl soundtrack with awesome art, it has fantastic art of Gideon walking through this Neo Kobe with
the black and red
too.
And it also has the Japanese box art of the game itself.
Yeah, and it's just really nice. It has the version of it that I got was the Yeti Tees limited edition with like black splatter on the red vinyl.
Yeah,
which is really, really awesome. I can't wait to get it, and I love the soundtrack in it, so no regrets there.
Actually, I'm curious about the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
There's I think maybe even every version of the game has a different soundtrack. Like the music's all the same, but like with different, like with the Sega CD soundtrack, with the MSX soundtrack, so they actually have very different attitudes. Like the MSX version is a lot darker, even though the notes are the same, and the Sega CD version is way more upbeat and video gamey. So, like, which version is it, or is it multiple versions?
It's actually the Sega CD version.
Okay.
And, I think a lot of people consider it to be the definitive as well.
Well, they would in the U.S.
Well, otherwise, outside of that, you know, people
like,
that are dual language people believe that the Sega CD version's the best because it has Red Book music and also like sound chip music, so it has a really nice dynamic where some of the music is coming from, you know, the Genesis itself, and some of it's coming from the CD.
Okay.
So it's really cool to have that all on vinyl.
Because like I have to admit, I'm sorry, just like I have to admit, as much as I love the Sega CD soundtrack, the MSX one sounds more noir. Like, it's more moody, I think. The Sega CD version's more like, you know, we're having fun with this game kind of music.
Well, what's really good about this is it's a very comprehensive soundtrack as well. It has everything on it, including you know, like Jingle Bells, like the Jingle Bells.
It has that. That's pretty good.
It has every bit of music in the entire game.
Yeah, when you meet Napoleon sneezing all the time.
Yeah. So I definitely recommend it for fans of that game. It's highly unusual to get something that's this comprehensive, and also for a game that has a very strong cult following, but like is very little known outside of that.
Yeah.
And also, the same company also released Lagrange Point, which is a very obscure Japanese-only Famicom game from Konami that has very special chip technology in it, made specifically to have very cool music in it, just kind of like you know, Castlevania 3 did. So it's an RPG that did get a fan translation, but to have a you know, an American release of the soundtrack for that game, as good as it is, you know, and everything, but like there's no fanfare for that game in the United States.
Yeah, so to put things into perspective, this game was so poorly known in the US that the fan translation only came out like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it only came out like 3 years ago, and it was one of those games that was really sought after by Konami nerds like myself, but like nobody else, essentially. So it's really great that we now have a fan translation. You can play it, and it's a very good game. But the music is, you know, at the height of really great Konami soundtracks. So it's just one of those that you know, I'm a huge Konami fan from that era, you know, 8-bit and 16-bit era. So I pretty much am collecting almost all these vinyls because like I love that era of Konami, and I have them all except for Contra 3. And that's mostly because I don't like Contra 3's soundtrack on its own. It's great in the game, in the context of the game, but it's never going to be something I would want to listen to. I may want to get it in the future. I know it kind of goes against my principles in that it's the only Konami one that I don't have. And it's a good game, and it's a great game. I love Contra. I'm a huge Contra fan, but the soundtrack itself is not very fun. But it's just... it has a really awesome art, so that has that going for it. But other than that, I probably am going to ignore it. But I did want to take some time to let everybody know that my favorite game of all time is getting a vinyl.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I actually got it today, or yesterday. That would be May 27th as of this recording. So it is Gunstar Heroes. Finally got a vinyl soundtrack, and Gunstar Heroes is my favorite game of all time, for a number of reasons, but one of them being, you know, it's a fantastic game. You know, it's the best in its of its type. It's the best run and gun game ever made, if you ask me. And probably the best Genesis game ever made. But it also is the very first game that I bought with my own money. So I have personal attachment to it, on top of all that stuff. So I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to take part in, you know, some fanfare of the game, which has very little fanfare outside of its own. It has, extra releases, like there was a PS2 compilation of all the treasure games from the Genesis. Well, most of them.
Yeah, McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure.
Well, it also didn't have Light Crusader as well. It had Dynamite Heady, Gunstar Heroes, and Alien Soldier.
And there was also this isn't the compilation, but Gunstar Heroes also got the Game Boy Advance re-release later on.
Well, it's a sequel.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Sort of, yes. But it's kind of a remake sequel. It's kind of like Evil Dead 2.
Okay, yeah, it's the same plot until it isn't.
Kind of, yeah. It's like it has a lot of... so many callbacks that it might as well be a remake of the first one, but it isn't.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. But anyway, one final thing here. I did pick up a new graphics card for my computer as kind of a present to myself because I got my first large commission check from work, and I got an NVIDIA EVGA NVIDIA 1080 Ti, which is fantastic. I upgraded my my PC, my gaming PC, and it makes it really top notch now. As a result, my PC now is VR ready. I could get a Vive or an Oculus if I wanted to. At some time in the future, it might be something I might be looking to. The Vive, in particular, is what I'm interested in. But I'm excited because I want to PC game a bit more again now that I'm setting up my living room. And having said that, I wanted to talk about the weigh-in this week. I actually kind of just gotten this is actually like the first moment I was in my apartment all weekend, so I actually haven't gotten a chance to weigh myself, but I can tell people this, that now that my studying time has gone by the wayside, I know that I will be concentrating a lot more on my weight loss again, so I will be getting back to that. So having said that, we'll move on to questions.
Sure. I think we could do one question. School Filmer asks, any favorite video game deaths? Now, we've kind of covered this, but he gives some really amusing examples. For example, Return to Zork has a lot of them. For example, the trap in the forest that flips you and the death screen upside down, or when you're killed by a Gru, you see crazy eyes, or when the bonding plant wilts completely while inside the comedy club, and it says, "You are too depressed for comedy," and the stained glass picture shows two of the masks, but they're both tragedy. So anything in that regard?
Probably my favorite, one of my favorites is Leisure Suit Larry. Most of the deaths are really funny, but if you... one of them is if you can... out of all the girls that you can woo in the game, one of them is the easiest, of course, and that would be Lady of the Night. And if you happen to commence with her, you don't wear a condom, your penis explodes.
Wow. I actually, when you said Leisure Suit Larry, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, where it shows behind the scenes of video game character deaths, and it's like, dude, we have to rebuild these characters. It's not easy, like at the Sierra factory.
Yeah. That one's really good too. That death in particular. So what ends up happening is your character dies, and then they take him off of another Leisure Suit Larry off the assembly line and put him back into the game, which is really funny.
Yeah,
too.
like there's an actual process regarding respawning your character. Like, he really did die.
So yeah, those two are near the top because they are oddly self-aware for a time in which things were just kind of beginning to be video games at that point. Video games hadn't been around long, and it was oddly self-aware for such an early example. Mm-hmm. So.
I decline to use anything from an early adventure game because it almost feels like cheating. Like, that was the point of the game. Like, you're supposed to explore, and if you fail because the games are largely trial and error, at least you don't feel bad about it because you're still rewarded by this excellent writing and these really engaging death sequences. Mm-hmm.
So King's Quest 1 in particular, I remember walking right into a moat, and if you don't tell your character to swim, he just dies.
Yeah.
Is it Police Quest where you have to like look both ways before you cross the street, or else you get hit by a car on the first screen?
Possibly, but that's definitely in Laura Bow, Dagger of Amon-Ra.
That's what I'm thinking of.
And that's a dick move, by the way, because you actually type look, and then it's like, you look, and then you walk and it still kills you. It's like you're supposed to look both ways. It's like, oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Speaking of Dagger of Amon-Ra, by the way, I think we mentioned this in a previous cast, but there's a death where you're just straight up eaten by voracious insects, and it's really graphic for the time. It's just like, wow, like you are like turned into a skeleton like before your eyes.
But go ahead, OldManStompy.
I'm gonna give a vote to something more recent. I'm gonna give a vote to Breath of the Wild. Not that it has particularly inventive death sequences, but Link ragdolls hard when he gets hit really hard. And when I don't die, it's like the worst feeling in the world, because you're like rolling and rolling and rolling, and the enemy is like getting in position to attack you again. It's like, just let me get up already and let me like get my shield up. And it's the most aggravating thing. But when you die, and you can roll like all the way down a hill, all the way down a cliff before you come to a stop, because you're really expected to go everywhere in this world. And so like the interaction between the physics engine and the death animation to me is really amusing. And a lot of the time, especially when I die because of my own stupidity, because I like hit the wrong button, jumped off a cliff, I can't help but laugh. I think the first time I died in that game, I tried to do a sprinting jump from one ledge to another, and I hit the wrong button, and instead I did a somersault attack, and I missed the jump, and I just fell with Link with his axe out, fully extended all the way down to the ground, down a mountain, and I was just like, well, I'm going to be dead when I hit the ground in a minute, so I might as well enjoy the scenery.
Nice. How about you, Lotus? What are your picks?
It's actually really hard for me to think of a favorite video game death. I mean, like I mentioned a bunch in Resident Evil 4 in a previous cast, like when Leon gets chainsawed, or when he gets the acid vomit on his face, which is, I think, to this day, the most graphic death for a character that's like outside of a Mortal Kombat game. But one thing that's kind of memorable, it's not flashy, but it's surprisingly cutting for what it was. Just in Super Mario 64, if you drown, it just looks pretty rough. Like for a Mario game,
it does.
Like
you feel really bad.
You're just like coughing up bubbles until you just go limp, and it's like, again, like this is Mario. Like in any other game, I'd be like, oh damn, I die. But you're just kind of like, whoa, when you see it in like the happiest, like proper, like first proper 3D game where it actually works. So that definitely got me. And another one I think I mentioned before, but it really stuck with me. It's a very violent, non-violent death in King's Quest VI, where you're in a dark room, so your eyes are represented by just 2 white pixels, and they're kind of looking around, and eventually, if you don't light the room, then you hear what must be the Minotaur have a scuffle with you, and when the fight's over, you hear like a rip sound, and both of your white dot pixels just kind of fly off in different directions and hit the ground, and you're like, Jesus, like evidently you were torn in half, so it's like extremely nasty, but you don't actually, you literally don't see anything, so it's just like, oh. But for favorite deaths, that's tough, but at least those are particularly memorable. Although I gotta give a shout out. OldManStompy will remember this one from Harvester, where if you're talking to the that crazy half the man he used to be, like just the upper torso like military official, who is like he's standing by like lifting himself up with his arms, and if you ever piss him off, then he'll just lower his arms and therefore his body onto the switch he'd been resting over, which just launches a nuke and blows up the entire city. It's like, what?
I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah, that was Harvester has all sorts of outrageous deaths, but that's pretty good. Oh, actually, and you know what? One more, and then I see OldManStompy. So just one more is just if you ever kill a civilian, I just never expected it, but you get picked up by the cops and sent to the electric chair. That just threw me.
So I will throw one more shout out, and it's difficult to explain why this is funny without spoiling the game, but I'll do my best. In that the third Zero Escape game.
Oh.
So there's a point where you're at you're doing that traditional sort of dramatic scene where you've got a gun and you've got to choose 2 people which one you want to shoot. Except they ask you to input
the one with the
name
mustache.
Yeah, I've always. So for those of you who can't tell, right now Vice is sporting a mustache when he isn't usually. So.
Actually, the really funny thing is that we are both sporting facial hair at the moment. So
both of us, all two of the three of us at this podcast.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm sure Lotus has facial hair as well.
Yeah.
Actually, at the moment.
All right. So, you have to manually input the name of the character you want to shoot. And the game has a lot of Easter eggs. Like, if you try to input the name of a character who isn't there, or the name of, like, the dog, it will tell you... Yeah, it will tell you. It will tell you can't do that. You know, that character isn't here, and you can get some like really interesting backstory. Sometimes the game will tell you something you didn't expect it to. But if you just enter every name that you can think of that you've seen at that point in the game, it's entirely possible that if you hit on a very specific name, the character with the gun will turn around and shoot what looks like the camera.
Oh, nice.
And then before the screen goes to black, you'll have this really confusing scene where they'll call each other by names that don't make any sense, and you'll have no idea what's going on. And it will take hours of gameplay before you have any idea what that scene means.
Oh, wow.
And it is possible to get that ending if you just input every name that you hear in the game to that point, and it is insane.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool.
Nice.
That kind of reminds
Really
me.
cool.
That reminds me. It's not a death sequence, but in Snatcher, when you go to Jordan, the supercomputer that knows everything about everybody, you can type in a bunch of people who were working at Konami at the time, and you could get like entries for them, which was just kind of cool.
You can do that in Undertale too. Like if you
when you
like,
input
you
your
never
name.
Like you can't name the Undertale character their canonical name. It won't let you. It'll say something like that's too close to the truth.
And you also can't do, I think, pre-established characters like Papyrus or Sans.
Yeah. But they'll talk to you if you put their names in.
Oh wow.
Well, I would like to, in a perfect world, continue this conversation, and because I could have an entire podcast about this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in describing deaths in Heart of Darkness and things like that. But we unfortunately stick to a general timeline here, so that would be the show for this week. We want to thank all of our fans that contributed questions, and please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions to our own YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Thursdays on our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week on pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as VyseTheBold, VyseTheBold, on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter. And I might add, please, maybe because he's maybe a little shy about it, but I would beg everyone, all of our listeners, to please support Lotus Prince on his Patreon. Please join and support him and the rest of the podcast by doing so.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and speaking of which, you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up at Twitter at Lotus Prince, all one word. And yeah, the Patreon URL is patreon.com/Lotus Prince, again, all one word. Now, because he was temporarily fired for the week, you do not need at all to worry about following Pyrojack Frost on whatever social media channel he is available on.
And you can find me everywhere I want to be found as OldManStompy, on PSN, not on Steam, but on Twitter, on YouTube. So feel free to give it a shot. We can have a discussion as to how much we want to donate to Lotus Prince's Patreon to make him play Super Mario World. For once.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would love to be in on that, actually, and I would love to make fun of him while he was
too bad we never talk. That's not true. Vice actually called me out of the blue like a few days ago, no, completely unrelated to the podcast.
Sure. Well, having said that, thank you for listening, and we will catch up with everyone on Thursday on Reactive Consciousness.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.